Section 4, A New Standard for Giving. Chapter 8, Your Child and the Children of Others. Read by Winnie Auma, Uganda Country Director, Village Enterprise.
Charlotte Perkins Gilman's short story, The Unnatural Mother, first published in 1895, involves a woman faced with a terrible decision. Walking up the valley above her home, Esther Greenwood notices that a dam is giving way. She immediately runs to warn those living in the village in the valley below. On the way, she passes her home, where her baby is sleeping. But rescuing her child will prevent her from getting a word to the villagers in time. So she does not stop. She saves the villagers and then returns for her child, but drowns in the attempt. The child somehow survives. Old Mrs. Briggs, who has had 13 children, takes a dim view of Esther's decision, calling her an unnatural mother, because she did not put her own child's life ahead of the lives of others. Mrs. Briggs' daughter, Mary Amalia, points out that Esther saved 1,500 lives and was no doubt thinking of all the other children at risk. Mrs. Briggs replies that she is ashamed of Mary Amalia for expressing such an opinion. A mother's duty is to her own child. This story raises uncomfortable questions. What is a parent's duty in extreme circumstances? Are there times when our obligation to others is equal to or greater than that to our family? You should love your own children. That goes without saying. And not to do so would be both wrong and unnatural. You must also provide for their basic needs: feeding, housing, clothing, and educating them. But should you put your own child's life at risk in order to save hundreds of others? Fortunately, few of us will ever face that question. The real dilemma for most of us is whether it is wrong and unnatural to reject our children's pleas for the latest trends in toys or cool brands of clothing, and to send them to local, entirely adequate, but not outstanding public school, rather than the admittedly superior, but much more expensive private one. The savings you gain by taking the less expensive option in each case will allow you to donate substantial sums towards saving the lives of strangers. But do your obligations to your own children override your obligations to strangers, no matter how great their need or suffering? Zell Kromvisky has been tormented by this very dilemma. Kromvisky has had a busy life. He has taught socially disturbed children in a Philadelphia public school, written 2 PhD theses, and given classes on Milton at the University of Pennsylvania. Along the way, he found the time to do real estate investing to accumulate by his mid-40s a portfolio of shopping malls and other assets worth about $45 million. Conscious of the need to provide for his family, Kromvisky put some money into trust funds for his wife and children, as well as for his sister's children. He then proceeded to give almost all the rest away, primarily to charities addressing public health, retaining only his modest family home in Jenkintown, near Philadelphia, and about $80,000 in stocks and cash. He spends very little on himself. At one point, He owned a single suit bought at a thrift store for $20. As he put it when he visited my class, "It seems to me crystal clear that I should be giving all my money away and donating all my time and energy." In fact, giving money, time, and energy wasn't enough for Kramvesky. Learning that thousands of people with failing kidneys die each year while waiting for a transplant, he contacted an inner-city Philadelphia hospital that serves mostly low-income African Americans and donated one of his kidneys to a stranger. Kramvesky acknowledged that his wife, Emily, objected to his giving away a kidney on the grounds that one of their children might one day need it. "No matter how infinitesimal the risk to your family," she told him, "we are your family and the recipient doesn't count." No doubt many spouses would have a similar reaction. Most of us put our obligations to our family, especially our children, above everything else. Putting the family first feels natural and in most cases right. Kramvesky, however, sees it differently. In his view, the sacrosanct commitment to the family is the rationalization for all manner of greed and selfishness. Nobody says, "I'm working for the tobacco company because I like the money." They say, "Well, you know, I hate to do it, but I'm saving up for the kids." Everything is excused that way. My students are unsettled by Kramvesky's selflessness, particularly when it comes to donating the kidney. He tells them that the chances of dying as a result of doing so are about 1 in 4,000, and that to withhold the kidney from someone who would otherwise die means that you value your own life 4,000 times more highly than that of a stranger, a ratio that he describes as obscene. Some students respond defensively to Kramvesky's presentation, questioning his facts and suggesting that the chances of something going wrong with a donation or subsequently are higher than 1 in 4,000. So what are the risks? A study of kidney donors has put the risk of dying around the time of surgery as 1 in 3,225. But most of these deaths were for donors with hypertension, and mortality for a donor without hypertension was less than 1 in 7,500, even lower than Kramvesky's estimate. This study did not find long-term mortality to be any higher in kidney donors than in matched non-donors. Another group of researchers pulled data from 52 previous studies covering 118,426 donors in order to examine the long-term impact a kidney donation might have on health. They found that women who became pregnant after donating had a higher risk of preeclampsia, and all donors had a higher risk of end-stage renal disease. But the absolute risk of these outcomes was still low, and the study found no evidence of higher mortality overall, nor of an adverse psychosocial health outcome. The medical risk of playing NFL football, it has been pointed out, are much greater, both near-term and long-term, than those of donating a kidney. It has to be recognized that success cannot be guaranteed for the recipient, as 5% of those who receive a kidney from a living donor die within a year of the operation. That makes a difference though only a minor one, to the risk and benefit ratio. Other students, however, are more open to questioning themselves. Perhaps, they say, I do value my own life at more than 4,000 times that of a stranger. Some do not have a problem living with that, but a few begin to think seriously about donating a kidney. I know of one who has donated a kidney as a result of taking my online course on effective altruism, and 4 others whose donations were influenced by reading my work. Paul Farmer, co-founder of Partners in Health, an organization that works to bring the benefits of modern medical science to those most in need, also feels the conflict between his love for his family and his concern for strangers. Farmer spent a year in Haiti after graduating from college, partly because he knew his money would go a long way there. While working as a volunteer at a Haitian hospital, he became friendly with a young American doctor who had worked in Haiti for a year, but was about to return to the United States. Farmer asked him if it was going to be hard to live. The doctor replied, "Are you kidding? I can't wait. There is no electricity here. It's just brutal here." Farmer asked, "But aren't you worried about not being able to forget all this? There is so much disease here." The doctor replied that he was an American and he was going home. Farmer says he thought about that response for the rest of the day. What does that mean? I'm an American. He wondered why being an American meant that you could forget about the people dying for lack of medical care in Haiti. He knew then that he would become a doctor himself. Farmer commenced studying for his medical degree at Harvard in 1984, but went back to Haiti on a regular basis, doing research on public health problems in Kange, a town in the Central Plateau that was poor even by Haitian standards. During this period, he met Tom White, who was one of Boston's greatest philanthropists. Farmer brought White to Haiti to see conditions for himself, and White soon helped him start Partners in Health and became, for its formative years, its principal financial backer. In 1993, the MacArthur Foundation awarded Farmer one of its genius grants, $220,000, essentially his to do with as he wished. He donated it all to Partners in Health. After he completed his medical training, he had appointments at Harvard in medical anthropology and at the Brigham and the Women's Hospital in Boston in infectious diseases. Donating his salary and any royalties or lecture fees to Partners in Health, which paid his bills and added the rest to its funds. As long as he was single, while in Boston, he slept in the basement of Partners in Health headquarters. His house in Kange was so simple, it lacked hot water. Sometimes in Haiti, Farmer would hike for hours to see patients living far from any roads. He insisted on doing this because to say that it takes too much time and effort to visit these patients was, in his view, to say that their lives mattered less than the lives of others. Flying from the peasant huts and their malnourished babies in Haiti to Miami, just 700 miles away, with its well-dressed people talking about their efforts to lose weight. Farmer got angry over the contrast between developing countries and the developed world. What troubled him most was the same thing that troubled him all the years before about the American doctor who was about to leave Haiti. How people cannot care, erase, not remember. Farmer married Didi Bertrand, the daughter of the schoolmaster in Kange. And when he was 38, they had a daughter, Catherine. At one point, after failing to save the child of a woman in his clinic who had complications while giving birth, Farmer began to weep. He had to excuse himself and go outside. When he asked himself what was going on, he realized he was crying because he imagined Catherine in the place of the dead baby. So you love your child more than these kids? He asked himself. That disturbed him because he had thought that he had complete empathy with the children he was treating. And he saw his inability to love other children as he loved his own as a failure of empathy. Tracy Kyder, Farmer's biographer, challenged that idea, asking him how he would respond to people who would say, "Where do you get off thinking you're different from everyone and can love the children of others as much as your own?" "Look," Farmer replied, "all the great religious traditions of the world say, 'Love thy neighbor as thyself.' My answer is, I'm sorry, I can't, but I'm gonna keep on trying." As part of that effort, Farmer, who travels a lot, is often away from his family, carries with him a picture of Catherine and a picture of one of his patients, a Haitian child of about the same age, suffering from malnutrition. Kyder was with Farmer on one occasion when he visited his wife and child, who were then living in Paris. Didi was studying in the archives of the French slave owners, the ordeals of her ancestors. He recounts a poignant moment shortly after Farmer arrived, when Farmer was playing with Catherine. Didi, who knew he was traveling on to Moscow, where Partners in Health was involved in an anti-tuberculosis program, asked him when he was leaving. "Tomorrow morning," he replied. In response, Didi, clearly upset, made a deep-throated exclamation, and Farmer covered his mouth with both hands. Kyder writes, "It was the first time I had seen him at a loss for words or action." If Farmer doesn't spend as much time as he would like with his family, it is because he is driven by the thought, if I don't work this hard, someone will die who doesn't have to. He just cannot accept the fact that people are dying of diseases for which treatments exist. To him, that's a sin. One can never work overtime for the poor, he has said. We're always scrambling to make up for our deficiencies. Like Farmer, Kramvisky insists he loves his children as much as any parent, and I'm convinced that he does. He protected them from his own commitment to others by setting up a trust fund for them. But his fatherly love does not, in his view, justify placing a value on their lives, thousands of times greater than the value he places on the lives of the children of strangers. Pressed by Ian Parker, who was writing about him for The New Yorker, to calculate a ratio between his love for his children and his love for unknown children, Kramvisky replied, "I don't know where I would set it, but I would not let many children die so my kids could live." and then added, I don't think that 2 kids should die so that one of my kids has comfort. And I don't know that 2 children should die so that one of my kids lives. Parker could not ask the fictional Mrs. Briggs for her opinion of Kramveski's attitude. But he seems to have found the next best thing in MIT philosopher Judith Jarvis Thomson, who commented, a father who says, I'm no more concerned about my children's lives than about anybody else's life is just flatly a defective parent. He's deficient in views that parents ought to have, whether it maximizes utility or not. Kramveski didn't in fact say that he is no more concerned about his children's lives than anybody else's life, though he came closer to that than most people would. Does that make him a defective parent? Children do need loving parents. They need to feel their parents will protect them and stick by them. Children might well be disturbed to discover that their father would allow them to die so that the children of strangers could be saved. Yet literature is full of situations in which parents must choose between their child and some broader moral imperative. And in considering these situations, we don't always assume that parents ought to put their children first. If we did, it is hard to see how Abraham could be honored, as he is in the Jewish, Christian, and Islamic religions, for his readiness to obey God's command that he sacrifice Isaac, his only son. The ancient Greeks too considered that a father might have to sacrifice a child for a greater good. In Euripides' play Iphigenia at Aulis, the Greek fleet is ready to sail for Troy. But the goddess Artemis will not provide a favorable wind unless Agamemnon, the Greek leader, sacrifices his daughter Iphigenia. Agamemnon vows that he loves his children. Only the mad do not. Yet he tells his daughter, it is grace that compels me to sacrifice you. Whatever I wish. Agamemnon's act is treated with more skepticism in classical literature than is Abraham's in Genesis. Because the ancient Greeks didn't think pursuing the Trojan War was as important as the writers of the Bible thought obeying God was. The limits to what a mother may do to save the life of her child are proved in a more recent setting in Joseph Cannon's novel, The Good German. In the aftermath of World War II, Renate Naumann, a German Jewish woman, is on trial for collaborating with the Nazis in the despicable role of a grapher, someone who identifies Jews living as non-Jews. We learn that if she had refused or failed to meet her quota, Naumann's own life and that of her elderly mother would have been at risk. But we do not think that excuses her. Then there is a surprise twist. We discover that Naumann has a son hidden away from the Nazis who could not have survived without her. Does that make her collaboration acceptable? Would she have been a defective parent if she had not put her own son's life ahead of the lives of strangers? We tend to think that people are more to blame for their acts than for their omissions. That may be why we are much more ready to condemn Naumann for saving her child than we would be to denounce a woman who in Esther Grunwood's situation chose to save her own child at the cost of failing to warn hundreds of others. Still, if we do condemn Ranette Naumann, we are putting limits on what you may do to save your own child. We then have to ask whether these limits are not also breached by choosing the act that saves your own child but allows other people's children to die. As I see them, neither Esther Gronwood, nor Zell Kramveski, nor Paul Farmer is a defective parent. They love their children and want to protect them. What makes them special is that they are also pulled for the needs of others in a way that most people are not. Like Abraham and Agamemnon, they are anguished over a choice that others make on the basis of their feelings alone, neither empathizing with others' needs nor trying to take a less partial perspective. In the end, in response to his wife's concerns, and because he did not want to be estranged from his children, Kramvinsky went back into real estate, made more money, and bought his family a larger home. When it came to the crunch, he was, after all, a natural father who chose to keep the family together. We might say that even he could not resist the power of the norm of self-interest, although it was not his acceptance of that norm, but the power the norm had over his family, combined with the special love he has for them, that forced his retreat from putting an equal value on all lives. Although Farmer holds himself to an extremely demanding moral standard, he is realistic about what he expects from others. I have heard him speak to students, attracting a capacity crowd, many of them fervent admirers, hero worshippers, almost. But he does not challenge them to do as he does. He doesn't take vacations, but he encourages others working for partners in health to take them. He won't spend money on luxuries, but he doesn't express disapproval of those who do, as long as they also give something to the poor. Perhaps that is because he realizes that it's important too. As Partners in Health co-founder, Jim Kim told Tracy Kyder, "Make sure people are inspired by him. But we cannot say anybody should or could be just like him. Because if the poor have to wait for a lot of people like Paul to come along before they get good health care, they are totally fucked." What this suggests is that we may need to set our standards lower in order to draw more people to meet them. Chuck Collins, the great-grandson of Oscar Mayer, founder of hot dog producer, was born into the wealthiest 1% of Americans. At 16, he was told that he would inherit a share of the Mayer family fortune. Growing up in an affluent suburb of Detroit, he knew that others in the same city were leading very different lives and felt the unfairness of it. He gave away most of his wealth before he even had children. People would say to him, "That's fine. You can be reckless in your own life, but you shouldn't do that to your children." Collins' answer was that parents make decisions for their children all the time, and that deciding that they will not inherit wealth is one of those decisions. My kids grew up with the advantages of intergenerational stability, access to education, financial literacy, and simply being white, he says. but they will not get an inheritance. Colin's firm belief that inherited wealth is not good for children was one of his reasons for co-founding Responsible Wealth, an organization for people in the richest 5% of wealth or income in the US that campaigns for tax fairness, by which they mean higher taxes on their incomes. Now a senior scholar at the Institute for Policy Studies, he directs the Institute's program on inequality and the common good, and is the co-author with Bill Gates Sr. of Wealth and Our Commonwealth, which makes the case for taxing inherited fortunes. Collins accepts the argument that, of course, we have to respond to our immediate family, but adds that once they are okay, we need to expand the circle. A larger sense of family is a radical idea, but we get into trouble as a society when we don't see that we are in the same boat. That seems a reasonable stance, and one not too violently at odds with human nature. But okay is a very vague notion. My students often ask me if I think their parents are wrong to send them to an expensive university like Princeton. If they don't receive financial aid, the estimated cost for 2019-2020 is $73,450. I respond that paying that much for a place at an elite university is not justified unless it is seen as an investment into the future that will benefit not only one's child, but others as well. An outstanding education provides students with the skills, qualifications, and understanding to do more for the world than would otherwise be the case. It is good for the world as a whole if there are more people with these qualities. Even if going to Princeton does no more than open doors to jobs with higher salaries, that too is a benefit that can be spread to others. As long as after graduating you remain firm in the resolve to contribute a percentage of that salary to organizations working for the poor, and spread this idea among your highly paid colleagues. The danger, of course, is that your colleagues will instead persuade you that you can't possibly drive anything less expensive than a BMW, and that you absolutely must live in an impressively large apartment in one of the most expensive parts of town. When Paul Farmer was discussing with Kaida his inability to love other children as much as he loves his own daughter, he commented, "The thing is, everybody understands that, encourages that, praises you for it. But the hard thing is the other." He is right, of course. It is much harder to love the children or strangers than to love your own children. Yet as a society, we encourage parents to love and care for their children because that is the way to bring up happy, psychologically healthy children. There is no better way of doing it. Some utopian communities have attempted to replace the family tie with an ethic of commitment to the whole community. But even the most enlightened of these efforts, like the Israeli kibbutzim, found that the bond between parents and children was too strong to suppress. Parents would sneak into the children's house to cuddle their children. And some studies suggested that children brought up communally found it difficult to make deep emotional attachments. Gradually, the kibbutzim brought back the nuclear family, acknowledging that the attempt to separate children from their parents and bring them up collectively was a failure. That is why the conflict that Farmer and Kramvinsky felt so acutely between being an ideal parent and acting on the idea that all human life is of equal value is real and irresolvable. The two will always be in tension. No principle of obligation is going to be widely accepted unless it recognizes that parents will and should love their own children more than the children of strangers. And for that reason, will meet the basic needs of their children before they meet the needs of strangers. But this doesn't mean that parents are justified in providing luxuries for their children ahead of the basic needs of others.